Wonder Woman! Wonder Woman 1984 is brought to us by director Patty Jenkins and stars Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Kristen Wiig, and Pedro Pascal. I really fucking hate when Americans go to try to say something Spanish and like their whole accent and verbiage and everything just changes all of a sudden. Mexico. Gracias. Pedro. Si. Bitch, please. Stop being fake. Anyway, I don't know where that came from. We follow Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, played by the always awesome, amazingly fantastical Gal Gadot. And this time, it's the 80s. More specifically, 1984. And Diana's pretty lonely seeming. I mean, it seems as if she's pretty successful and she's been doing her Wonder Woman thing, saving people and all that stuff, but as a whole, it seems like in her personal life, she's pretty distant from society and overall pretty lonely. She clearly still hasn't gotten over Chris Pine's character, Steve Trevor, who died something like 60 fucking years ago. Chick's got some serious attachment issues. She ain't letting this shit go. But overall, it seems like things are going fairly well for Diana, except for that whole, personal misery thing and all, but other than that, it seems like she's doing fairly well for herself. When a new magical item shows up in the world and starts causing some mischief, Diana has to spring into action to go try and figure out what the hell's going on with this thing and where it came from. Also, her long-lost love, Steve Trevor, which, by the way, she only really knew for a few days and got this attached, but whatever, details, is somehow miraculously brought back from the dead. When a businessman, played by Pedro Pascal, comes in possession of this magical item, the world starts to go to shit. And Diana has to make that age-old superhero choice between her own happiness and saving the world. Wonder Woman 1984 is different than the original Wonder Woman movie. It's got a lot of the same people behind and in front of the camera, but it's a very different movie than that original was. And I do think that that's by design. The movie not only takes place in 1984, but it's almost made like a movie was back in 1984. I mean, it's got all the pretty bells and whistles of modern movie, but the way the movie's made, some of the filmmaking techniques, and especially some of the performances seem like they are right out of 1984. Not just the way they're dressed and the setting and all that. No, even the reactions, the way these people are acting. It doesn't seem like how people were in the 80s, it seems like how people were in the movies in the 80s. Some people have seen this and commented on how some of the characters have been kind of like goofy and hokey, but I think that calls back to that time period. Once again, not necessarily how people acted in that time period, but how people in movies acted in that time period. Case in point, there's a scene near the beginning of the movie, which you've probably seen bits and pieces of from the trailer, where Wonder Woman's apprehending some bad guys in a mall. It's got a whole bunch of 80s throwbacks in this scene. But even the bad guys, like the way they react to things and the decisions they're making, they're very 80s. Like one guy decides to real quick take someone hostage and really like escalate the situation really quick. This is not realistic in the slightest, and it's not how things happen in movies nowadays. But if you look back to like action movies in the mid 80s, this is the kind of behaviors that our bad guys display. And even when she comes and starts capturing people, the expressions on their face, they're real heightened and kind of goofy. That's just how it was, and I'm pretty sure that's the direction this movie was going. I mean, we saw the last movie where everybody was fairly serious, so we know that these people, everybody involved, in front of and behind the camera, can make that kind of movie. I think they were trying to have a good time with this one, and it has backfired a bit. I think people are looking at the performances and the way that some of these scenes are shot in this movie and thinking, what the fuck is this? It's kind of goofy. And some aren't realizing that I think that's how it's supposed to be. Now, whether it works or not, that's a different discussion, but I do think that it was intentional for the most part. And on the topic of whether it works or not, for me, yes, it did work. I was cool with it. I loved it. I grew up in the 80s, so I loved seeing these scenes. Yes, this movie and its tone and how everything plays out for the most part is quite a departure from the DCEU we've come to know and the Wonder Woman that came before this one. But once I realized that's what was going on here, I had a really good time with the performances and setting and everything going on in this movie. That's not to say the movie's perfect by any means, but that aspect of it that I'd heard that was kind of bad, that a lot of people were really trashing, I had a good time with. I enjoyed it. Now, our story is fine. It's okay. We don't really have a main villain for a lot of the movie. There is a character that they put off as being the main villain, and I do find this character, played by Pedro Pascal, to be an interesting villain because he does have layers. characters, I didn't really see him as the main villain. Really, the main villain that's causing a lot of this, at least second-handly, is never even in the movie. I don't really want to say much more because of spoilers, but once you see the movie, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Pedro Pascal's character of Max Lord is actually an interesting character. Like I said, he does have some layers. He's not inherently a bad guy, he's just kind of corrupted by power. And it's not like corrupted by power in the traditional sense. He actually wants to do good. He has fairly good intentions throughout most of the film. But the way he goes about carrying out these good intentions causes a whole lot of havoc. Now, those are the most interesting characters, when you have someone who's not just bad for bad's sake. They are actually doing something. When your villain has a plan, when they think they're right, and they can actually tell you, this is why I think I'm right. Regardless if you agree with it or not, you can understand it. That's what makes interesting villains, and I think that's what this villain did. They did a really good job with that. You understand why this guy's doing the things he's doing. He's not inherently bad, but he does end up doing bad things, or at least bad things happen as a result of the things that he is doing. That made the character much more interesting than your typical bad guy, and definitely more interesting than the last movie's bad guy, Ares. Ares just wanted fucking war. I mean, he was a cool looking villain, and the whole backstory to Ares is pretty cool, but ultimately Ares was just bad because he's bad. He likes to fuck shit up because that's what Ares does. He's the god of war, he fucks shit up. But we get more here, and I really did appreciate that. Now, it's no surprise we also have Kristen Wiig's Cheetah in this movie as well. Now, I'm not spoiling anything there because it's a major part of every one of the trailers that's out there. Kristen Wiig's Cheetah was kind of a mixed bag for me. For the vast majority of the movie, I actually really liked the character. I liked how they built her, I liked her progression, I liked how she got to where she got. Kristen Wiig did a really good job with this. Her transformation was natural and it occurred throughout the movie. It's the end game of this character's arc in this movie that I had an issue with. Where she ends up with, I understand, and I'm okay with that. It's the artistic vision and direction they went with this character that I had a problem with. Now, when I first saw this character in the trailer for Wonder Woman, I thought, holy shit, that looks really fucking bad. And it did. I don't care what anybody says. Now, while it wasn't like the worst CGI in the world that I've ever seen, compared to all the other really good looking CGI on screen during the trailer, this cheetah that we saw in that trailer just looked really fucking bad. Now, what we get in the movie actually does look a lot better than that. It doesn't look as bad. It's still CGI-ish, but it doesn't look like that Cats-esque monstrosity that was in the fucking trailer. No, what we get in the movie is actually better. Now, the vast majority of the scenes with this variation of cheetah in them take place at night, and maybe they use that to mask some of the CGI, but even then, this does look better than that did in the trailer. So anybody who saw that shit in the trailer and was just like, oh, damn, rest easy, because it does look better. Now, the part of the movie that this character shows up in didn't fare so well. There's been a lot of criticisms of this movie and its length and the stuff that happens in it, and whether it's needed, whether it's not, if it's bloated, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's got something to say about Wonder Woman 84. And I will just go out and say, as far as the story is concerned and the execution and the events of this film, I actually really enjoyed it. It's got its issues here or there, and we'll get to those. But for the vast majority of this movie, I had a really good time. It kept me interested, I was with it, I was having a really good time. However, the last about 15 minutes, more or less the climax of the film, really just fell apart for me. And there is a spot that I can point directly to and say, that's where it starts. That's where everything starts to fall apart. And it's the part when Wonder Woman shows up in her big gold suit with the wings that we've all seen on the posters and in the trailer and all that. And I mean, that suit isn't the reason that things start to fall apart, but that is the point right there, that everything just really starts to like go astray. Now, this is officially the beginning of the climax of the movie. This is when stuff's really supposed to ramp up and get really badass and cool, and we're supposed to get all those payoffs that we've been waiting for the past 2 hours for. But that's not totally what you're gonna get, or at least not in the way that I wanted, and it seems like that's not the way a lot of other people were wanting it either. There's action that happens, there's fights, there's special effects, there's things, and just all kinds of stuff happens in this last 15 or 20 minutes of the film, but you just don't give a fuck. It's kind of just all messy and thrown together. This is also where the whole cheetah fight happens, where she goes full cheetah, and I mean, that didn't help, because while it's not awful like it was in the trailer, that character's still not great looking. I didn't have a problem so much with Kristen Wiig's character being cheetah, and I didn't have a problem with her having somewhat of a transformation, and I know in the comics that's probably what she looks like. This character in this movie is probably more comic accurate. But just because it works in the comics doesn't mean it's gonna work on the screen. I wouldn't have made this character like a fucking walking around on two legs cheetah. I would have just maybe had it as a human form with maybe just a couple of little things here or there. Prior to this phase of the transformation, she was pretty badass. She could do all the super moves and all that, but she more or less still looked like Kristen Wiig. I would have preferred they keep that, maybe a couple of little aesthetic choices that would have differentiated her and said, hey, this is, you know, Apex Cheetah or something. But this total transformation thing, it just didn't work for me. But more on that part in the effects part of the review. The rest of the ending has issues too. The thing that happens in the end, I understood it, and I appreciate the message that they were trying to put forth with this ending and the thing they went through. I mean, it's pretty warm and feel good and fuzzy, and that's great. But something else it was pretty just anticlimactic. Also, when looking at the repercussions of the end of this movie, I have a whole lot of questions. Clearly, I can't voice too many of those here without spoiling things, but ultimately, while the movie's message in the end is kind of feel good, the fact of the matter is, when this thing happens, there's still a lot of other shit that happened as a result of everything else prior to this part of the movie that is still happened and still gone on in the world. The world is not a happy place at the end of this movie, and I feel like they probably should have given us a little bit more answers to that. This may seem like a nitpick, but it is what it is. This is what I was thinking about. I mean, we're left with this situation and we're thinking, okay, that's great that this happened and all, but what about everything else? And also, there are some characters that did some shit that have caused an awful lot of mayhem, and we don't really know what happened to these characters. I mean, did they get what they had coming to them, regardless of revelations they did or did not have? Or are they just free? Or did they get arrested? Are they in jail? Are they dead? We don't fucking know. There's just a whole lot of what ifs at the end of this movie, and it left me kind of unsatisfied. And that was the biggest issue of all with this movie. That last part, it just left me just wanting, not necessarily more, but I just wanted answers. I didn't need it to take any longer. I didn't need a whole lot more screen time. I just felt unsatisfied. I was really satisfied with what was happening up to this last part of the movie, but they really just flubbed the end of the movie. And when you misfire the end of a movie, it can really make the rest of the movie just kinda not seem as good anymore. And that sucks, because I remember thinking up to this point, I'm having a good time. I had heard people giving this movie shit, but you know what? I'm kind of enjoying it. And then this ending happened, and it's like, okay, that's a thing. That happened. I mean, I guess that's an ending. We stopped it all, kinda, but that's about it. That's not satisfying. Just because you stopped a certain thing from happening, that's not satisfying. We want to know why, how, what happened to certain people that we've been following throughout this whole fucking movie. Now, I mean, the rest of the movie was still entertaining, but as I said, it just really sucks when the end, the climax, the thing that's supposed to tie all that up just kind of falls apart. And that did take away a lot of the enjoyment that I had with the film. And that's unfortunate, because I was having a good time with it. But hey, it is what it is. You screwed up the ending, guys, so it kind of hurt the movie more than if you had just screwed up the middle a little bit. Now, our performances here were overall actually a really good time. Gal Gadot proves to us once again why she is Wonder Woman. She does a fantastic job portraying this character, as she always has. While I know that Linda Carter was Wonder Woman in a lot of people's eyes for a very long time, mine included, Gal Gadot is so good as Wonder Woman and always always is that I couldn't see anyone else in this role ever again. Batman, Aquaman, The Flash, all these other characters, yes, I could see other people taking them on, but Wonder Woman is Gal Gadot. She's stoic, she's funny, she's heroic, she's brave, she is fucking Wonder Woman. Well, not fucking Wonder Woman, I guess that would be Steve Trevor. But she is Wonder Woman. Kristen Wiig also does a really good job as Barbara, aka Cheetah. Her transformation from the typical 80s nerdy girl to the badass Cheetah is very well done here. It's fluid and natural throughout the film. It doesn't happen just out of nowhere. Now, there is a breaking point that happens that does finally have her go over the edge, and I get why this happened. The reason she's given, I totally get. I think that maybe the character jumped into full-on bad guy mode because of this decision a bit fast, especially for a movie that was 2.5 hours fucking long, but I get why it happened. And yes, she was showing some tendencies to go over that dark side edge prior to this. There is one scene in particular where some things are said and some realizations are made on her behalf that cause her to go over to the dark side. And overall, it was well done. Yes, that was a little bit fast right there at the end, but overall, I didn't have a problem with that. That was fine. Once again, while she's not like the main villain of the movie, she is there. She's one of the bad guys that's working in this conglomerate of villainy. And as a whole, besides a few aesthetic choices there in the end, I think that her character was portrayed really well. Pedro Pascal's Max Lord is probably one of the most layered characters in the film, and his ascent is actually one of the more interesting, however a bit inconsistent at times. I get how he got from here to there, and it's not quite that cut and dry in the film. They do take you on a journey with this character, but there are a few parts where it seems like we're missing something. We're able to connect the dots and understand how he got from like here to here, but sometimes it seems like there's a scene or something we didn't quite get. As I said, we understand what's going on. We know why the world is the way it is at this point in the film and why his character is, but it just kind of seems like it jumped somewhere. Like while something else was happening on screen, there's another scene that was maybe cut or something with his character that we miss. But with a 2.5 hour movie, me sitting here saying, hey, I think we needed more scenes seems a bit odd. And while I was enjoying the vast majority of everything that was going on screen in this movie, it may have behooved them to shave a couple of scenes down and just stick in a few filler scenes with this character to flesh him out just a bit more. Now, I know what you're saying. You just said he's the most layered character in the movie, and now you're saying he needed to be fleshed out more. What the fuck? Make your mind up. Which is it? Well, it's kind of both. He is the most layered character. He has the most things going on, and the most thought needs to go into his character, whether you like him, whether you don't, whether you agree with what he's doing or you don't. All that stuff's there, and I get why it's happening, but I just wanted to see a little bit more of this transformation in the little parts of the film. Overall, though, I really did enjoy this villain, or at least the build-up to this villain, because much like everything else in the film, the build-up and most of the movie was really enjoyable. When we get to that climax, the payoff of the film, which does include this character, it doesn't quite pay off the way we want. So it kind of taints everything that came before it, including this character. But overall, Pedro Pascal did do a really good job here with this character. While we may not have gotten quite the payoff that we wanted there, and I mean, yes, we did get a conclusion with this character to a degree, it just wasn't quite as fulfilling as we'd hoped it would have been. But that's not really Pascal's fault or his performance. His performance and portrayal of this character was a really good time. And this brings us to Chris Pine's Steve Trevor. Ultimately, if you enjoyed this character in the last movie, you will like him here too. He's more or less the same character, it's just that this time he is the fish out of water instead of Diana. So if you enjoyed that character in the last Wonder Woman film, you will enjoy him here too. He's not quite as like secret agent super suave as he was in the last film. This one he's a bit more awestruck and in wonder most of the movie, and that does make sense seeing as how last time he remembers being on Earth was like 1920 or something like that, and now it's 1984. So he's like seeing spaceships and all that, how he went to the moon, and just airplanes he could never even imagined, and all kinds of crazy shit. So that makes sense. But the most interesting part of his character is the same thing that made him interesting in the last film. And this is a bit controversial, but it's true regardless. And I don't mean this in any kind of negative way, and some people just won't like hearing this. But the fact of the matter is, in that film, and even in this film to a degree, but especially in the last film, Steve Trevor is the actual hero of the movie. The first Wonder Woman, and this one to a degree, is about Diana becoming Wonder Woman. It's about her becoming a hero, not necessarily being a hero. She does heroic things, for sure, and she is amazing, and she has the potential to be a hero, but to be a true hero, to be heroic, she is still learning in these two movies. And I'm not talking about going and deflecting bullets and saving lives and all that. No, it's the heroic choices. These are the things that she's still learning in these two movies before she gets to the point she is in like BVS and Justice League. And she learns those things through Steve Trevor. And before anyone says shit, this is not a male-female thing. It has nothing to do with that. This is a learning things through the people that you love and know in your life. Steve Trevor was a hero before Diana met him. He was in the army, risking his life, going on these almost suicide missions for the better of mankind. He was willing to sacrifice himself for the betterment of everyone else, for those that he loved and cared for. He understood that a gun or a sword or brute force didn't always do it. Sometimes you had to make that ultimate sacrifice for those around you. And that is what he taught Diana in the first film with his sacrifice. Now in this film, we have another lesson that Steve helps Diana come to. It is a decision that she has to make, but it is one that he helps her with. That he says, this has to be done because you're the best. You are the person we need. I know that you can be a hero, and this is a decision you have to make because of that. This is not some bullshit about, oh, the woman needed the man to do that and become that. No, it's not any of that. Stop looking at it like that. It's about you as a person, regardless of your sex or gender. Depend on the people that you love and care for around you to help you make the best decisions. You learn from those people. That's what it's about. It doesn't matter what these people have swinging between their fucking legs. And Steve does help Diana with these decisions. He helps her be the hero that he and everyone else knows that she can be. Everyone has to learn these things somewhere, and that is one of the things about Wonder Woman I like. She's not just an ultimate hero out of the box, if you will. Anybody with superpowers can like run up on a whole bunch of motherfuckers with guns, swords, whatever, and whoop all their asses. If they're not worried about dying, who the fuck cares? You got superpowers, you're bulletproof, all that shit. Well, yeah, it looks heroic, and that's great. You're doing it for the betterment of mankind. How heroic is that really? There's no real danger for you yourself. You're just going in there because you fucking can. What Steve teaches Diana is true sacrifice. When you actually do have something to lose, giving that up for everyone else. And that's what makes a real hero, when you sacrifice for everyone else. And that's what he teaches her, that's what she learns, and that is what we actually get to see in Wonder Woman's story throughout the films that she's been in. We don't always get that in a lot of other superhero movies. We do to a degree, but it is a central theme with Wonder Woman's movies, and I really appreciate that we see that. We get to see her actually become heroic, become an actual hero, and that's why I think that Wonder Woman means a lot more than some of these other superheroes in the DCEU. And while this movie is very flawed in a lot of ways, that is one thing that they still included here, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I will say that the lesson that Steve teaches her here is seen about a mile away. When the last movie, you didn't really see it coming until it was about to happen. Here, you know it's gonna happen. It comes up and you're like, that's where we're going. That's gonna happen in a little while, so I see it now. It's projected a bit more for sure, but it doesn't change the fact that the lesson's still there, and while yes, it was a bit more gimmicky and a little bit more projected this time, I did appreciate that it was still there. And Chris Pine did a really good job overall once again, but especially in being able to be there to show Diana the light and teach her this lesson so that she could be the hero that she ends up being. I know that was a bit long-winded on the whole Steve Trevor part and Chris Pine's performance, but I thought it needed to be said. It's something I've always thought and always seen, but when you say something like that, especially in today's climate, and especially with a movie that has the main superhero character being a female, people all of a sudden want to try and say that you're being sexist, that she needed a man and all that. fuck, no, man, it's not about that. It's not about male or female. It's about people and the people in your life that you care about, and listening to those people and understanding that you, no matter what your sex is, by yourself can't always do it alone. That's probably one of the best things that this character projects to the world that I don't think a lot of fucking people get. But hey, whatever, that's my opinion. You can take it however you will. It is what it is. Overall though, everybody in the film did a really good job. Performances were not one of the issues here. There are a couple of inconsistencies here or there, but it's not necessarily the performances, it's more the storytelling and the way the film is executed. Now from a technical standpoint, the movie overall is in good hands. Like I said, there are large portions of the film that are kind of shot like a movie from the 80s. Lots of camera angles and camera trickery and just kind of the sensibilities behind the camera while making the film seem like they were going for a very 80s vibe. It's not the entire movie. As the movie goes on, it kind of distances itself from those sensibilities a bit and becomes a bit more modern in the way that it's shot. But there are chunks of the film that are even made like those movies back from the 80s. I myself enjoyed these little tidbits and these throwbacks. And really, maybe I was just seeing something that wasn't there, but hey, that's what I saw, that's the way I took it, and I liked it. Overall, it's a really good looking movie though, especially like the first 10 or 15 minutes that take place in Themyscira. Holy shit, this is some beautiful fucking landscapes we got here. Like some really big sweeping shots of like waterfalls and mountains and all that, which I assume are actual practical locations. There may have been some CGI trickery here or there, but for the most part, it looks like actual places they filmed, and they're absolutely beautiful. These are some great eye-melting looking shots. But even the parts that aren't like that, just the city scenes and all that stuff, the movie looks really good. And when it comes to the special effects, everything here for the most part is looking pretty good. However, there are a few inconsistencies, and oddly enough, I think it's less about the CGI itself or the practical itself. I think it's kind of when they tried to mix these two together when it looked just a little bit off. Which is funny because typically when you do something practical and then use CGI to enhance the scene, it comes out looking great. But there's something off in a few spots here, and I don't know exactly what it is. It's usually little things, nothing that like ruins the movie, but it's definitely things that stick out. I mean, like you'll have a scene that just looks great. Everything that's happening is like, yeah, this is believable, it's awesome, it's great. What the fuck was that? It's real quick like that. I mean, something happens, you're like, whoa, wait, you fucked up. You missed something right there. And I saw it. I saw it. You tried to hide it, but I saw it. There's a few spots where like Wonder Woman takes off running down the street, and it looks as if they did this practically, maybe with one of those magic carpet things they drag behind a car or something, and then use some CGI to kind of clean it up. And I don't know if it was like a mix of these two things or what, but there's something about it that just looks kind of odd. It's not long shots. These are all little things sprinkled in throughout the film, but every now and then, like some wonky CGI shows up that really just fucking stands out. Once again, none of it's like terrible. This is a very CGI heavy movie, so you expect to have some CGI that doesn't quite stand up to the rest. But as I mentioned, there are some elements that show up that do stick out compared to everything else here or there. Now I said we were going to talk about Cheetah, and this is where we're going to talk about Cheetah. I just really didn't like this scene. I wanted to like this scene. Cheetah, like full Cheetah, proto Cheetah, or apex Cheetah, whatever you want, when she looks like a fucking cat, this is only in one part of the movie. The final big battle between her and Wonder Woman. Now we've seen some shots from this scene in the trailer plenty of times leading up to the release of the film. And as I mentioned earlier, they clearly must have done some extra work to this scene since then, because what we get in the movie does look a lot better than it did in that trailer. But it still looks off, and looking at the way that the lighting is in this scene, I would be willing to bet that this scene originally took place during the day, or at least in brighter conditions. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just has that look to where it was shot in the daylight, or at least in much brighter conditions, and then they brought it down to make it look like nighttime. Which would make sense, because the character of Cheetah doesn't really look that great. Still better than the trailer, that's for sure, but still not great. They should have just kept it as practical Kristen Wiig, maybe add a few prosthetics here or there, but nothing too insane, nothing too over the top. They went too far with it. I don't care what the comic book looks like, okay? I've played Injustice 2. I know she's a big fucking cat that stands up like a human being. That fine, that's cool. It works in the comics, works in video games, works in all that shit. It does not work here though. The character is just kind of laughable. If she shows up in the next Wonder Woman movie and is a more central character looking like that, we're we're going to be laughing a lot of that fucking movie. It's not quite as bad as like Cats from last year. That's kind of how the trailer looked, but it's not like great either. It really stands out. And also the way that the scene is shot, the stuff that's happening and going on, it is kind of hard to tell what the fuck is going on a lot of the time. This seemed like it was supposed to be a really exciting scene where you could see everything that was going on and it was kind of cool. And if it was lighter, like if the scene was in daytime or dusk or, you know, with more light going on, it may have been. But for the vast majority of the scene, while you know basically what's happening, you can't really tell moment to moment what's going down. And that sucks because this was kind of one of the big climactic battles of the film. You've been looking forward to this the whole time, and when it happens, you're like, oh, a fucking jumbled mess. Okay, that kind of sucks. And I'm willing to bet a lot of that had to do with the CGI. They had already shot the practical elements of the film, and then they got into editing and said, ooh, that does not look as good as we'd hope. And they probably just cut away at it, cut away, moved, did this, did that, brought the light down, did everything they could to make it look passable. And by the time they got there, they just kind of had this Paul Greengrass jump cut, real zoomed in CG nighttime shot that just doesn't work. And like I said, that's unfortunate because it's the end of the fucking movie. Now, while these CGI flubs do definitely stand out in the film, overall, I will say the movie does have good special effects, but these few trip ups here or there really stand out, and that's unfortunate, especially when, as far as I can tell, one of them ended up ruining one of the most climactic parts of the movie. Guys, Wonder Woman 1984 overall was a good time. I know I've sat here and gone on and on about all the little aspects of this movie for a lot longer than I expected to, and I think that's because I really did enjoy a lot of this movie. So it is a bit irritating when you enjoy something that much that it just doesn't pay off at all. Or there's like little things here or there that kind of detract from the experience. So yeah, I want to talk about those little things and that real big fuck up in the end that took away from this thing that overall I had a really good time with. But overall as a product, I really did enjoy this film, even though that last part was so disappointing. The story, while nothing groundbreaking, was a great vehicle to get our characters going all over the place doing neat things, and did lead to Diana learning one of the most valuable lessons she's going to learn in her ascension to herodom. I don't even know if herodom is a word, but I'm going with it. Herodom. We got some great performances all around, and the movie looks great for the most part. We do have a few CGI flubs here or there, especially there in the last part of the film. However, overall, from a technical perspective, the movie is fairly solid. The ending is disappointing, and it does have a tendency to kind of taint everything that came before it. But the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of the runtime of this film, I had a really good time. And while it wasn't as good a time as the original, it was still a good time and totally worth a rent.
All he wanted was this.
To return some videotape.
Overall, I did enjoy this film. Now, the biggest disappointment being the disappointing ending, but as a whole, I did have a good time. And if you did enjoy the last movie and those characters, and you just understand that you're probably not going to get quite as much satisfaction out of the end of this movie as you would like, then give it a shot one night, and I think you'll have a good time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of Wonder Woman 1984. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Washington, D.C.
What did you do?
So there's something else that this movie gave us that I didn't mention because I guess it could kind of fall into spoiler territory. Minor spoilers at best. I mean, really, it's not even like story-related spoilers. It just kind of spoils something that we get in the film that's not really a big deal, but may be a big deal to like Wonder Woman fans. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to hear what it is I'm talking about, go watch the movie and then come back to this part. It's not really a big deal, but it is just something I wanted to mention real quick. You've been warned. So the movie gives us something that I've always thought was one of the most corny parts of Wonder Woman, and that is the invisible jet. And really, I didn't hate it. I thought the way that they did it kind of worked. They actually took something that sounds as corny as this ancient Amazonian warrior with superpowers having an invisible fighter jet, and they made that make sense. It's not like a central part to the story or anything, but it is there. We get to see the origins of Diana, or Wonder Woman's, invisible jet. This has always been one of those things like Aquaman talking to fish and stuff like that. That's just like really corny. Maybe it works on the page, but the idea before actually seeing it on screen just seems super fucking corny. But like with Aquaman, they made that work. They made it happen. They were kind of self-aware about it, but they actually made it work. And here, they took something that I never really thought was gonna show up in the films, the invisible jet, because it just sounds pretty fucking corny, and they made it work. And I really appreciated that. I liked how they did it. They actually fit it in there. It made sense why they did it. It wasn't just like shoehorned in. And as I said, surprisingly, they made it fucking work. So I was like, wow, look at that. They actually made that shit work. So if nothing else, regardless of what you think of this film, you could talk all kinds of shit about it and say it was terrible for this reason or that, or it was great or whatever. Something this movie did do is it took something as goofy sounding as Wonder Woman's invisible fucking jet and made that shit believable within the world, of course, but made it believable and not corny. And haters, you will never be able to take that from this movie. Never. Wonder Woman!